The DaySong of Thoughtless Openness, written 1 September 2024, 5:43 a.m. There is no other heaven beyond writing, Lee Seong-bok. And so with 2% of the waning grain moon left, with an AQI of 50, likely from wildfires, smokestacks, the DaySong seeks to enter September in a heaven of its own making sense of what just happened, why summer's lease was revoked, how the ink went out, just as the last postcard to art was realized. Art, finally back at the house of hummingbirds, still high from the emerald-flavored northern lights over Desolation Sound. August 28th, 2024. Your cell phone sees the aurora borealis better than you do. Hashtag American Sentences. There, in the sky, the path of elders, Arthur, and find it hard to believe you've trouble tracking that. Knowing freed from the agenda of possession and control is how Bringhurst put it once, and control one of those persistent delusions. August, they runs out of steam in a flurry of postcards, and me too, tracking path of the crescent moon as it rises over Desolation Sound as seen from Galley Bay, hoping after all this to achieve a state of what Ray calls thoughtless openness as my ink runs out. Blessings, Paul. We want as much time in heaven before our ink runs out. And we see the ink levels and friends who'd better get that pen going, squeeze out what's left of the cereal only they can write and no one can finish. One can finish August, all 56 days of it, with days of 83-degree highs, 10 above normal, the weather app says. And we're going to have a talk about normality in the Anthropocene, just as Israel recovers 6 hostage bodies from Gaza. Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg pulled in one of them. The crime of attending a concert. Israeli bombs, says Hamas. Tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, says the Post, and famine-like conditions. You don't have to think of it as poetry. You don't have to think at all about what kind of writing you're doing. You're writing some kind of unself-conscious open utterance, being as clear as you can or as muddled as you want. You're not writing for anybody. It's spontaneous, is how Joanne Kiger put it. Thoughtless openness until the ink runs out. The heaven of writing where nothing ever happens, except emerald green aurora borealis, the drug of the northern dawn, with a waning crescent grain moon rising up from behind Isla Redonda, piercing the aurora borealis, our drug of choice as we savor what ink we've left. See if we can ready our weary Anthropocene bodies for what surely will include dancing. This dance at the heart of being, sings Robert. This music at the heart of thinking, sings Fred. These chopped off maiden hands grown back at midnight, as Sharon knew, with or without the waning grain moon, with or without auroras boreales sobre Isla Redonda, as Dionisio Alcalá Galiano would have put it. Your cell phone sees the shadow of a September sky, now it's cast on an upward angle, better than you do, as you're managing ink, consuming social mierda, squandering what little thoughtless openness you've been able to achieve between sunrises and stat checking, between August's last dying halo and responding to health insurance denials of benefits, between cafe evictions for the crime of typing a poem for a dying friend, this ancient technology too loud for the dog groomers and Australian gentrifiers who are determined to erase what little's left of the Scumberland we knew and loved. Using a typewriter in a cafe, Peter says, "You monster." Breakfast of chia overnight oats, berry medley with extra Oregon blueberries, bee pollen, raisin cranberry bread, toast with coffee and maple syrup. 7:23 a.m. Wilderness as something that thinks Ray sings. If not a mind, then a considered strategy we could get inside of. Were we to put the kingfisher over the U-tube, if we could slow from the speed of capital to the speed of August, pull ourselves from the gravity of control. We might start by washing our face. We might start by watching heron fly over I-5. We might take the first day of the 9th month, which was 7th, and jab our meat hooks into it for 1 New York minute, see what dance possibilities there are disassembling for a few seconds of heaven. The noise stops us from harvesting what's left in our ink bin. And it is later than we think. And Richard knows better than any of us. Richard, who is tired of this bitter illusion, tired of the tumors carving up his esophagus and assorted innards, tired of the parlor tricks and attempted death defiance of allopathy that it has to offer, tired. Allopathy, the antithesis of poetry, and therefore heaven. Poetry, the will to live one's life and die one's death, changing, live and die from passive to active, says Lee. Between coughing jags and eventually loss of blood, dying as a poem, the end of the series, the way to compose the start of your decomposition. Charlie Potts in A Dream of Lawrence Ferlinghetti, forgetting to tell him he should have shot Gregory Corso. Poetry, the clutter of one's life as we chew through it, selecting hunks we call meaning while hanging on best we can between box score consumption and earwax removal, between day songs and after postcards, between glimpses of the mountains as they start the slow transition to the color purple as one of our daily summer astonishments. DaySong is breakthrough in our daily practice. With only so much ink, so many minutes, with so much noise through which we must cut. It is not a poet's job to simplify the mystery of existence or its lexicon, Brenda tried to tell us, and that all a writer needs are 4 true readers, and one of them can be a tree. And yet we go on avoiding death, avoiding the dance, refusing to read our poems to trees, domesticating ourselves by letting the machines make us weak, forgetting the seasons, not sending back the hype, not savoring the islands. Isla Redonda as the moon rises up, the waning grain moon crescent casting moonlight reflections on desolation sound as we all do. Minute reflections of what we once considered other and now know as nothing more than considered strategy or thoughtless openness, or the last gulp of lukewarm maple-flavored coffee on the way to the next leg of the stumble, the harvest, the DaySong. 8:29 a.m. And then the return of Kingfisher, machine gunning beyond the depth charge, beyond the copacetic, around the corner of the peninsula which harbors Galley Bay Kingfisher couple, single Kingfisher, the beaver pond of Cumberland, beyond the Lameway, and home to thousands of hungry mosquitoes who seem to prefer my sugary blood over the gluten and dairy-free blood of a certain Canadian Kingfisher who shows the noble humans how to earn a wilderness badge of self, how to settle into that jewel of Indra's net, that pejorative state or condition of the land inhabited only by wild animals pulled out of self and time, Ray says, into a condition of thoughtless openness, or watching the house finch bathing in an improvised back deck bird bath, forgetting itself. We could carve out a space in the midst of delusion to see the amateur ikebana with a tight-fisted peony she arranged in an old sake bottle. Or we could forget the small s self and see what returns. It might be green. It might be nature. It might be energized particles from the sun slammed into Earth's upper atmosphere at speeds of up to 45 million miles an hour, 72 million clicks. But our planet's magnetic field redirects the particles toward the poles while we cry or take photos or get back in the hot tub or rummage through vitamin bottles for psilocybin capsules, or try to render that all into a high energy construct where the heat of feeling warms the intellect which may be asking too much. But we don't ask. We practice letting go of what Michael called the parasitic personality, which is me driving the car from Horseshoe Bay to Anacortes. Continuous practice of the time being, as we all are, time beings, Uji, in Dogen's parlance. For the time being, the earth and sky, which was Jan's fear. For the time being, a staff or a whisk. For the time being, a memory of Kubota sake after 64 days of sobriety. For the time being, no August to fritter away what ink we've left on attempted muse control. No one can drag heaven into the back and have one's way with it. For the time being, what may be lenticulars cling to Isla Redonda's highest peak, of which we only see that above the sound. All time is being, all time is ink, the self arrayed for now into the form of the entire world. Reflect now on not just seeing stars, but seeing current constellations so vivid they show up on cell phone photos, stunning the PCC cashier. Reflections of the noble ancestors chewing on something very much like this and now pointing us in the direction of the medicine we need now, however that manifests. Maybe as Howard Levy's harmonica, maybe as Shakti Konakal's, maybe as hearing Jan on Quadra saying something like the consorts of testosterone have forgotten how to sing. How far from heaven are they? How much do they hate the poem? How will they extricate their children from the fate they seem to have swallowed? How in dire need of a bleach white madrone branch are we when in this state, a deep practice of the real, a kind of earthly sanity, a climb up the peninsula ridge, to wonder about a pine growing out of nurse logs, root ball, or scrub pine, kinnikinnick, haircap moss, cushion bush, American parsley fern, a salal leaf or three, colored with their journal of the season of no heat dome, of the pioneer fire, of your attention being focused on the practice of attention fracking. Don't say we didn't warn you. Attention fracking is the natural prayer of El Diablo. Extractive profit models amount to the systematic fracking of human beings, pumping vast quantities of high-pressure media content into our faces to force up a spume of the vaporous and intimate stuff called attention, which now trades on the open market. Increasingly powerful systems seek to ensure that our attention is never truly ours. And hence the heaven of the poem, of praxis, of noticing the about-to-die dahlia, which in Cascadia is not black and is past its prime, but still in command of its faculties, as if it were the flower commander in chief. How we arrange our own truly human misery, as Kosho knows, is your ego. How we domesticate ourselves in gourmet samsara and tax breaks for the 1%, and luxury items, and social mierda, and avoid the portable wilderness of thoughtless openness, and wonder at saw-wing flight. Yes, those by the marsh of Saltery Bay, once a Japanese salmon saltery and fish packing plant, and now a place to ferry south after awe at midday saw wings, whose flight patterns are the same heaven the poem is, with similar lineation. Who previews our next lifetime? Whose life is play as example to rat racers who inevitably conclude rats are winning, and so redirect themselves to the art of poetry postcards and non-cafe typing explosions and non-conventional lineation at its least logical and most carless. Faith as a form of humility, being as a dance through the blue feedback of one's life, defense from attention, fracking, through the soul building of Nag Champa voiceovers, retreat into the tribe of two, if necessary. Here's my tribe of Cascadians, never far from the sea, sometimes eating Japanese pancakes, okonomiyaki, for lunch, sometimes being evicted for typing on a typewriter in a cafe. Your typing is upsetting the dog walker. Your tribe is high on genmai cha, Sometimes we remember our vowed end delusions, and sometimes we remember it's not delusional to try that each day, each season, each oral flash of the kingfisher who signals summer's last gasp, who understands the treasure in the fetid nest of rejectamenta. May Sally and Barb's sodium levels be here after fine. May Ma learn why she smoked for 65 years. May Linda find joy in the room, and may Andrew forsake Maga as they will forsake him. Oh, my rabbit queen, who this May 8th became more aerodynamic. Were our tribe to sink to we two and one rabbit, we'd still sit in the cloud room of lakeside bliss we've cultivated, and you tend, after 10 years of tribe making, the cricket on asphalt in late August morning rain is not singing. Yoga, peach, green tea, 10:54 a.m. The poem is a collection of words that were trying to get away. Lee Seong-bok. Coda, ritual, helicopter, psaltery, okonomiyaki, atmosphere, telepathic, piano, ontology. Who dreams a place into being? And what song holds it there out in space? Scott Lawrence. Words dream. Words before they escape, if they escape, barred control. The thoughtless openness knows if words are yours, they'll return. The barest madrones, bone-like in their whiteness, above Galley Bay. From the ridge, Adelia scrambled up as you were taking a meter of moss off boulders with your Hoka sandals. You're climbing up a DaySong whose layers include Bernadette and Pierre, Joanne and Michael, Barry and Sharon, Robert and Jan, Daphne and Fred, Sam and George, Wanda and Brenda. They who could taste the terroir in the poem, the wine and the desolation sound prawns. They who could taste, or at least intuit, the freedom of non-attachment. Each scratched a bit of the noise off of the mind heart exercise poetry is, or death, or both. The world, a contradiction of attempts at connection to it, said Barry. And yet he's a poetry Buddha ancestor, despite it. And the hoops we make Canadian poets jump through. The way Barry thought he was a low number on a scale. We all get the syntax we deserve, and there is no failure. There is only a theology at which the poem hints, and the more wild it is, the more we can smell it, rather than some coercement of words into shapes do not resemble spirit, but more a chest of drawers in which to keep underwear. A theology of earthly sanity. And on 1 September 2024 is marked by an open astrogate, a machine gunning kingfisher, a welcome respite from seagulls who had a penchant for a particular anacortes roof, a napping rabbit, a green tea buzz. In the undifferentiated wholeness of wild thinking spell, is how Ray may say it and once did. No mind, no doing, just a gut hunch and lurch with whatever foils the escape of words Lee Seong-bok knew were trying to get away. He called it indeterminate inflorescence. And the wild is a kind of flowering, and the poem is when you let it. That is a blossoming of the real, a harvest, an inspired improvisation. A collection of shallots started life in Jan's germination chamber and may have ended up in dip by the smoked salmon, hummus, and kubota sake. Only so much of this is graspable, which is not by design, but is an attempt to harvest the wild energy of September, with 21 days before outliving John, Paul, and Jim, 3 days back in the USA, year of the dragon slaying, third year of the DaySong, and the fifth DaySong of a life. This our measure, rather than seasons of baseball disappointment or seasons of seemingly endless genocide. 1:19 p.m., chicken sausage and egg sandwich with Gruyere and second cup of coffee. The daily is an engine of these and other particulars, says Sharon, receiving most of what the DaySong is, a track of receivings, chewed through particulars, the foam whipped up in coffee, the weight down to 202.8. Elegant people on the box, and no more Wayne solos like that again. A happy rabbit fresh from intestinal distress, so a little gun shy of the late chicory, bamboo leaves, blackberry, and thimbleberry leaves, clover. No, he inhaled the clover, but the coffee savored. The aster blossoms, too, though not the litter at Astergate, another homeless encampment, and Jeff back in the earbuds, 'cause we've ended as lovers, tearing out my heart again. The DaySong is mirror of self, one needs to polish now and then, despite its earlier status as heaven, a dharma blossom, and integrating spontaneity that confounds ordinary linear thought, Ray says. The through line in all these matters: Sharon, Dogen, Wayne, asters, chicory, consciousness, Japanese pancakes, harmonica. Instead of moving from one logical connection to the next, their cognitive processes tend to repeatedly circle an issue until they get a holistic sense of it. Then insight and action arrive with an intuitive burst. Written in the margins. Seriality? Ray says this is the way wilderness thinks, and it's the wilderness where you get mauled, where you drop off a cliff until they find dental records, where the current will carry what's left of you downstream. Small songs after Jan's wiki. Rabbit song. Gray one, how quiet. He stops at 3 rose hips, usually under something. Nothing softer than his fur or faster than his race for a slice of banana. It takes him a while to trust any human. Small song, blue. Day before Labor Day, sky takes its time to turn blue. The dark apricot burn before sunrise and the shadow of an island cloud. The sky, one large blue ear, beyond time, Dogen knew, required humility, and the aster time September is. Guess I'll wear my new hat. Small song in praise of ears. They're what got us here, covered with Sennheisers and glued to weather report and later to an intuitive burst of syllables, last pierced by a child's wish. Arena for tinnitus, decades now, drunk on the song of Kingfisher, come, my darling, and touch them again. Small song of BC departures. Of course we leave late and the water taxi motor's dead. Of course I have a ferry reservation and get steps while waiting. Saltery Bay, why yes, where Japanese salting happened and not assaults, Adelia. The August aurora over Isla Redonda, one never forgets. Small song for Astergate. Peak bloom now, and you can walk in the lake with sandals, the powder blue of your blossoms reminiscent of Door County, Wisconsin. And you don't mind the litter, and love the recognition began that summer years ago. The stars Astria could not see in the sky, now grounded and radiating patience. 3:44 p.m. Every time you write, you're required to die again. Lee Seong-bok. Anne cried, washed Joseph's body in lavender oil, hair in rosemary mint shampoo, lit candles, and covered him in flowers just cut from the garden. And this I found necessary to tell Richard, whose dance with the duende started after the diagnosis of stage 4 esophageal cancer that spread. And I don't think Richard is Buddhist. And maybe he put on his best face, meeting with me that 70 minutes that Friday Island afternoon. Seemed to me he was ready. Shouldn't be a big deal. But death in our culture is something happens to someone else. Yet there's Richard getting help from the ex who's typing postcard poems, finding a home for his poetry collection, savoring what time with Sommeil he has, a honey death moon, he calls it. When death comes, face and actualize death. Do not avoid death or desire death, said Dogen. And when the death postcard comes, one festooned with rabbits, asters, and pines, savor it. For your exercise, Richard, is my lesson, and my card to you a lesson in power of this art we share, and each want to master, the art of letting syllables have their way with us out of their way, so something simple and true can give a noble human a moment to remember, an occasion of experience, a divine surrender, some solace in this world of hostages and drone bombings, forest fires and waterboarding, the systemic maiming and killing of children, the numberless acts of animals in human form. It shouldn't take a quality like duende to see what's natural, even simply to experience it. Celebrate the life, death allowed for whatever time it lasted. Grace Richard. This seems to be the subtext, the lesson. If transmissions of grace are possible, may it be so. And may the feeling, intimacy, and surrender of our Island Friday linger so we can remember how to make, as Rex Roth said, sacramental relationships that last always. Abrazos, hermano. Paul.